everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Leader Tips by E. This is also being brought to you by me, Ebony Butler. Also, you will find me as The Ebony VP. The Ebony VP is my name that you can find me on most social media channels. And then also the _Ebony_ VP as well. That information also will be in the caption of this video. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about a topic that I know is near and dear to a lot of women's hearts, and also just people in color in general. And so we're going to spend some time talking about this term. I know most of you all have heard, which is called microaggressions. There's a lot of research being done right now that pretty much tells us that we should really retire the word microaggressions. And I totally agree, because truly they're not small and subtle instances, and the way it sounds as though it's something small, it really doesn't impact women of color or people of color, and that is so far from the truth. And for the purpose of the video today, I am going to use the term microaggressions because I believe it is a standard term that most people have heard of. Again, in a later video, we'll talk more about retiring that word altogether. A couple of years ago, I was asked to be a part of an interview committee. And when I was on that interview committee, I really started to see how assumptions and biases really started to come into play. And of course, microaggressions. I didn't really understand what a microaggression was until I started being on this team. And I want to just give you an example, because I know you're probably wondering, well, Ebony, what is this really all about? And I'll tell you that a lot of times I believe that us as women and African American women and people of color, we get so accustomed and used to these unintentional, sometimes intentional acts, statements of discrimination, to where we become numb to it. The challenge with that is that we are all victims of microaggressions. And the importance of this video is for us to talk about, what do you do when you're a victim of a microaggression? And also remember, my channel is always about helping our allies out as well as our inclusive leaders who really want to drive equity and belonging in the workplace. And so we'll be able to provide tips that way as well. Remember, I will be shifting my eyes down at times because I've really prepared for this video. And so I did take a few notes. I want to make sure I don't miss as we're going through the video. All women and all people of color face microaggressions, and more importantly, women of color face it double time. And the reason being is because we're not just subjected by the gender biases and the gender discrimination, we also are up against the race biases and the racial discrimination as well. So if you can imagine being an ally or an inclusive leader who does not identify as African American or a person of color, just understand that we are under attack double time. And with that being said, I'm just so glad that you're tuning into this video to learn more. How many times have you been told you are so articulate? How many times have you been told that, oh, your name sounds exotic, or, oh, can you pronounce your name again? Or, oh, it's hard for me. Or, you know what, better yet, do you have a nickname you go by? How many times have you been told that? How many times have you been told you have some really good English? All of those are intentional and subtle acts of discrimination, of assumptions, of biases, and all of those are considered microaggressions. So a microaggression is basically the everyday statements, actions, and incidents that people often will say are subtle, they're indirect, they're unintentional, and we have to admit sometimes they are intentional. And it's just discrimination against a marginalized group. The reason that I knew that that was a microaggression, and so when I started learning about that topic, why it really came to life for me, because after someone would leave out of the interview, if it was a white woman or a white man, we weren't spending the time to talk about how approachable they seem. We weren't spending the time to talk about how they pronounce their words. We weren't spending time to do that. And when it was a person of color, especially a woman of color, we would spend time talking about, did they wear a smile? We would spend time talking about whether or not they were approachable. We were spending time talking about how they articulated their self. They're so articulate. And so I would say that if you are a person who is not of color, one way to know that you are tipping that line and or you have probably been demonstrating exclusive behaviors or microaggressive behaviors, if you would not say what you said to someone that's white. I'll say it again. If you do not say what you said to someone that's white, more than likely it is presented as though it is an attack on my race, my culture, or my gender. What are some tips? What are some things that we can do as a woman of color, a person of color, when we feel under attack? We feel that we have been a victim of microaggressive behavior. Take a deep breath. I cannot stress enough how important it is for us to breathe. And the breathing will help us to be responsive versus reactive. Because the next thing we want to do is we want to really determine the importance of the relationship, understand if there's trust in the communication, because the next thing we need to get feedback. We need to get feedback. And that's why pausing and taking a breath is going to be important for us to not react, for us to assess the relationship and the importance, the longevity of it, to determine how we're going to respond. Also, we need to remember how we want to continue to engage and interact with that person, so we can really focus on transitioning their way of thinking. That's the goal. Because sometimes some things are said and people truly don't know. And so we have to practice the art of giving grace. And I think that we do that a lot, and we don't practice the art of giving the feedback. So we're going to take it a step further. We're going to practice the art of grace, and we also need to make sure that we give the feedback. And we need to consider how to approach the situation in a way that's going to be very productive. Are you too upset right now to have the discussion? Maybe we should pause, breathe, have a drink of water, and come back. Because the goal is to provide people with knowledge and insight, especially if we love the relationship. We understand it's going to be a long-term relationship. We don't want to devour that or cause a conflict that deep without us talking about it. And so it's going to be very important for us to be strategic on how to give the feedback and approach the person in a productive way. Something I'd recommend would be something like, you know what, can we talk about what you just said? It doesn't sit well with me, and this is why. I would love to share with you a different perspective. Are you okay with that? And talk. What are some things we can do as allies and or inclusive leaders when we want to really be able to create this safe space and create a space where we are truly not imposing microaggressions on someone else? I need all of my allies and inclusive leaders to be open to feedback and be open to being called out when there's exclusive behaviors or when there are microaggressions that have been said or done. As an inclusive leader, as an ally, we need to be okay for that to be addressed with us. And I also encourage for our allies and inclusive leaders to also take a breath, because it is easy to get defensive about it. And I also encourage you to not think about it as it's truly about you. Because when you start thinking it's about you, you start thinking, well, I'm a good person. Well, we didn't say you were a bad person. We're just saying, hey, you said something. It was offensive. And let's talk about the why. Be okay with that. Own it. This is an awesome opportunity for you all to connect closer and also to establish trust, and most of all, for you to learn. Understand that we all make mistakes. And so just like I said, for the people who have been offended, I encourage my allies and my inclusive leaders to also give themselves grace. We're imperfect people. Recognize that the person must feel comfortable with you if they're bringing it to you, because I will share, it's not easy for us to do. It's really not. We're not the angry Black women. It's not easy. And it gets to a point to where if we care about someone, we care about the relationship, we gotta do it. Sometimes we have to do the hard things, not just when we're doing the hard things for your organization. We have to do the hard things for ourselves, for our mental wellness and health. Offer a genuine apology and move forward. And then just like if you hurt someone's feelings or you made someone fall off a bike, right? You're going to follow up and make sure that person is okay. We encourage you to do that as well. The hope is today you were able to walk away again with at least 2 golden nuggets on what are some things you can do when you feel like you are a victim of a microaggression or microaggressive behaviors. And also for our allies and inclusive leaders, what are some things you can do to stay clear of microaggressions and to also just learn more? Today, we talked about understanding what a microaggression is and its impact, learning how to respond when you are a victim, and recognizing the opportunity to be an inclusive leader and an ally whenever you're called out or you hear someone else express a microaggression as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video today. And I look forward to you joining the next one. If you really found this to be valuable, please subscribe to this channel, as my goal is to bring 2 to 3 videos to you every week. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Goodbye.